Hello there, and welcome to the Hawk Fanatic Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. That's a lot of Hawkeye in the title there. Uh, this is us. We actually are recording a podcast. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We had some technical difficulties at the end of the last week on my end, got locked out of some accounts that didn't allow me to record a podcast, which was a little frustrating, but it worked out okay because we're here on Monday, April the 24th, a couple days after the open spring practice. And we've got coordinator press conferences that happened on Thursday. So plenty to talk about today. If we did it on Friday, we wouldn't be able to recap this probably until Thursday. So everything works out and happens for a reason. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Scott, you got to stay warm in the press box while I froze my ass off in the East stands on Saturday. But we both got to see practice. And as we talked about just now before we started recording, a lot of guys out. So I think it was hard to evaluate position groups, things like that. It really was about just trying to look at some individual performances and kind of get an idea of where guys were in certain set. Like for me, looking at the linebackers with, it looked like Harrell was in the middle with Higgins at the will and Fisher at the Leo when they went three linebackers. That was one of the so those are the type of little things you can kind of take away in a game like that or in a practice like that. But tough to extrapolate anything real meaningful in terms of the overall football team.
Oh God, it was, there was nothing, we were talking before we went on, and I remember all the days when especially Mark and I, when we'd sit in those East stands and he would go play by play, I would go personnel grouping, and we would try to figure out who was on the field for each and everything. And, there'd be a couple of guys out, but not like this. This was just wholesale. When you look at the top 4 or 5, offensive linemen, no left tackle, no right tackle, no left guard, and then you had couple of other, no backup center. Then on the defensive line, you didn't have 3 out of your 4 starters were out there. You had your other defensive tackle, Y.A. Black, was not out there. So it was just, when you start to load all of that up, it's like, yeah, none of this really matters. You're not doing it for anybody, not even yourself. So I decided to watch more individuals. I wanted to see how Nick DeYoung went against some of the defensive linemen. I wanted to see how do the quarterbacks perform to some extent. And even then, that's tough because there's only one wide receiver who's on scholarship who's out there.
Yeah, I know.
And you're going against one of the best defenses in the country anyway. And then when you're hamstrung like that, it's like, come on, this is like, it's like, I hate to equate it like this, but it's the way it is. It was like a JV offense from high school practice, wearing the blue jerseys or red jerseys or whatever your team does against the varsity defense. It just, so what you're doing was trying to just watch individuals, see what you can get. I mean, the quarterback wasn't even out there, it was, he was out there for drills, but not for team. And so, yeah, it was just more of a matter of, okay, who's kind of lining up where. As you said, there were kind of like 4 to 5 linebackers that were mixing in and out. Higgins was both at the Mike and the will. You had Fisher at times at the will with Jackson Rexroth as Leo. Then you'd have Jaden Harrell and Zach Tweet sometimes was in there, and Fisher outside. So there's like 4 or 5 that were kind of in that mix. And
that makes sense too, right? They're all competing and trying to, waiting till Jackson gets here. And obviously he's going to factor into the mix, but it seems like it's, at least what I gathered on Saturday was kind of what I thought going in. There's a lot of competition at that position.
Yeah. And Carson Shire wasn't there. And he's, if I was to, which I'm going to do actually today, I'm going to write the depth chart for the defense. I mean, Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins are the inside, but I'm not sure who goes where. That'll be determined probably in fall camp, maybe even afterwards. And then probably Carson Shire as Leo. That would be my guess right now today, but things can change, and maybe Fisher's better out there. I don't know. And even to top that off, you look at the Cash back, and he's he could play linebacker for most downs.
It was it was funny. We were talking about this before recording too. I do the videos. I cut up all the 11 on 11s.
Yeah.
And you miss shit when you're watching it live and videotaping. And I got Pat in my ear talking to me, and then I got Matt Holst and other, how it is down there in the West or in the East stands during that thing. Everybody wants to talk. You're trying to watch. But I did notice when I went and did the cut-ups yesterday that number 29 was standing out quite a bit. I watched him. I mean, in coverage, run support. He's without question one of the breakout guys this year for me anyway.
The secondary as good as it was last year and the year before that when it led the country in 20. I mean, the last 5 years, it's head and shoulders above the country in interceptions. I think it has 83 interceptions last 5 years. Next team is like 75. And this might be as good or as talented as any unit, at least the first unit, as anyone that they have. They got showed. Talking to one of the coaches just kind of on the side, he was like, Cooper won that MVP, but really it was Sebastian Castro. He lit up some people. He was, he went down the field, made some coverage. And I think you got to keep him on the field at all costs. I think he's just that good. So only in my case, it's like only if you have a 2 tight end set with a fullback, old Wisconsin or maybe Minnesota or something, do you bring in a Leo. I think that, last year they ran like 72% was cash anyway. I would bump that up considerably with somebody like that because he can hit like a linebacker. I mean, I don't think you're losing a whole lot with him on there. And then who are you going to take out? I mean, if you, you take, and then
injuries happen too. So you got to, and we'll see. I mean, Nick Jackson gets here. I mean, he's still got to learn the defense in a short amount of time. I'm sure he's working on it now through the playbook, but just getting out there and getting a feel. It'll be interesting to see how much ground he's able to make up when it gets to August.
Yeah, Seth's going out there this week since everybody's out recruiting. So he's going to go out and talk to him, and I'm sure he's catching up. And with him, he's already got the muscle memory on how to play a position like that. It's just kind of learning the nuance of the Iowa's defense, and it's more complicated than people think it is. So it's not like you're just going to walk in day one and voila. But I think he's good enough on the second week to really get the hang of it too. And so I like where they are at the linebacker when he's here, but you're going to have to develop behind him. As we saw, Justice Sullivan is now on a medical, so he's gone, and that's really that's a shame because he had a lot of potential, and they need some of those younger guys to develop that are sophomores now. Jaden Harrell is kind of taken a step forward. Carson Shire kind of has taken a step forward, but he's been injured. And then Zach Tweet looks the part, but is linebacker his area, or is it maybe go the other side of the ball, because although they looked pretty damn good at that position at fullback, I thought on Saturday, that might've been the one standout for me. But overall, that's kind of you don't just replace Jack Campbell. Seth Benson's pretty hard to replace too, but I think they're capable of that one. But Campbell is the difference maker that kind of like Tyler Linderbaum and those guys. You just don't replicate it. You just but if you bring in a guy like Anthony Hitchens, which I think Nick Jackson is, then you can mitigate some of those misses pretty good. So,
yeah, there's a nice highlight tape from Nick at Virginia that's on YouTube. I did recommend people check it out. It was interesting to see how they used him. They moved him all around on that second level, even put him on the edge at times. At Virginia. So he's got versatility. I think Higgins has versatility. Fisher has versatility. They've got versatility in that group. So my guess is in August, they're probably just going to mix and match, move guys around, go in with an idea. Okay, this is probably our best alignment, but have an open mind to, we can move guys around and see what our best group is. But I agree with you. I think Castro is a huge part of that allows maybe a little bit more time because you talked about Scherer and Tweet and some of the other Harrell. those guys, I mean, what we saw Saturday doesn't mean that's what they're going to be in August or what they're going to be in September. They can get better as the season, as time goes on. You hope they do get better. So I'm probably less worried than I should be without Jack Campbell.
Yeah, no, I know. I guess to me, if it was a Jack Campbell on the offensive side of the ball, I'd be way more concerned. Because I think that they've got so much depth up front on the defensive line, more than they've ever had, more than last year even. And then in the secondary, their depth is a little bit concerning to me, but their starters are not. And then, in there, I think of, if I was to just make a guess, a wager on the fall, is I think, Higgins has been in this defense now going on in his fourth year. I would keep him in the middle, make the calls. But, a lot of their things funnel to the will anyway, when it comes to the way they play. And Nick Jackson is certainly capable of playing that role. It's not that dissimilar. And really, I think he's probably, dare I say, maybe I can't judge the thumping ability because I think Higgins is really good at that area, but I think he might be a slightly better athlete than Higgins. So that's not bad to have in Will, because sometimes they have them more in space. Mm-hmm. And if they've got to go cash, again, I think Sebastian Castro, he should get a bank NIL, and be Sebastian Castro. I think that would be, you just leave him on the field, except when maybe a team's going goal line or something like that. Yeah. But even then, if they're going like goal line, and we've seen this when they go like 6-2-3 or something like that, leave him on the field as kind of the corner or the edge. Take out like Jamari Harris. I think right now, in my view, they've got 3, maybe even 4 defensive backs who are just elite, and DeJean's the best in the country, maybe. Castro is really good. Wampa, we know what kind of ability he has. It's just a matter of mentally catching up. And
he looks different physically, man. He got a lot bigger.
Yeah, no question. And Quinn Schulte is, Brett Greenwood like, and and Jamari Harris, he's still, I would say Phil and Kirk were a little bit more. Yeah, he's still got a long way to go, because he's been out for a year. But he played really well, I thought, 2 years ago, and looks like they're going to still try to bring somebody in at that position. I don't know if it's depth or a challenge, either one. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if that person comes in as a grad transfer and competes and wins that job, and all the better for Iowa.
If you can get a Nick Jackson type at corner,
yeah,
why not?
Go get Storm Duck. He should be, he went to, North Carolina. He was second team all ACC. Then he went to Penn State for the spring, and now he's hitting the portal again.
I saw that.
He should probably go to Oregon, in my opinion.
And so corner is probably a position where they could add, and it makes sense as it does at wide receiver, which we'll get to in a second. You talked about the absences on the defensive line, and we knew about Logan Lee and Noah Shannon and Wyatt Black. Those guys have been out of the depth, at defensive tackle. But I think we saw how deep that position is with them out. When you talk about, Pittman and Thompson and Graves, those guys would start on a lot of teams, a defensive tackle. It's almost an embarrassment of riches on the inside. It's not that on the outside. I think there are some guys developing there. I think Max Llewellyn's got a chance. Herkett's got a chance. It was good to see Chris Reams get some run the other day, finally. So work in progress on the edge, on the outside. Joe Evans was out. But that interior of the defensive line should be, those guys should get rest and be a terror inside this year.
Yeah, and in this defense, that might be the most critical position that Iowa plays, because it's largely a 2-gap. It's not a statistics-based defense up front. What it is tie up as many blockers as you can, get penetration physically, or man the line of scrimmage, and then let everybody else swarm to the football. And when you have, again, when oddly enough, when you have defensive tackle number 3.5 and 5, and they're as good as most of the years that Iowa has with Graves and Pittman as out there. I mean, it just is remarkable. I mean, when you think back, Rob, it's not been that long ago. Like remember the year when they were really huffing and puffing when they had Jaleel Johnson, Faith Akakity, and Nathan Budgeta as their three. And they threw on Cedric Lattimore just for a body. And no offense to Ced, I mean, he made a pretty big play in the USFL yesterday, but they, compared to what he was as a true freshman, they are 6 or 7 deep better than he is. And Graves looks like a monster. I mean, he was gigantic. I use this story when I went and visited him up in, what is not Dayton, Gowrie, Iowa, in high school. He was one of the first people when I walked into high school. I went, holy shit, he's just that big. Well, he looks way bigger now. And Pittman looks the part. Like, he could play as zero tech and be a really physical player. So, there's going to be some good players not starting. I mean, it could be like Aaron Graves. People are going, well, why isn't he starting? Well, he's got 2 seniors ahead of him, that like with Lucas Van Ness. But as far as the outside, Rob, I really, really, really like Deontay Craig. I think this would have been the year if Lucas Van Ness was there. Then, oh boy, it would have been, elite with a capital E. But I like Joe Evans, of course. I think he's been a really quality player. And having those two, and Craig, I think, is an ascending player, but having those two allows the, 4, even 5 guys behind him to kind of mature at a different way. I mean, Ethan Herkett is motor, and pretty talented, but really a heavy motor guy. Max Llewellyn's got a lot of ability. It's just we haven't seen it. Chris Reams is, 5th year guy. It's time to, maybe put him on field goal block in the middle, but, and then there's the 2 redshirt freshmen who got really big, Caden Crawford and Brian Allen. And Jackson Filer brings something completely different off the edge. So I just, and I forgot about Terrio Thompson inside, so this is a deep unit. They're probably looking for a bell cow pass rusher. Craig can be that guy. Van Ness certainly would have been that guy if he would have stayed, but I'm not going to blame him for taking, $20 million signing bonus this week. So, but still it's going to be one of the best in the country.
Yeah. And I think the group as a whole on the outside, they'll be able to, rotate guys, keep them fresh. Herkett, I think, is a guy that will help this year. I'm with you on Craig. Evans, you kind of know what you have there. And then some other guys in that group that we talked about, Llewellyn and Reams and guys like that have kind of been around for, at least a couple of years now. And then Brian Allen made some plays on Saturday. He did pop off the cut-ups that I was watching a couple of times. So potential there as well. And Caden Crawford is a really good athlete, played quarterback in high school, actually, and is really, as you said, bulked up. I kind of got down with the defensive lineman for a little bit the other day, and when they were running a drill, and was impressed with the development physically of a lot of those guys. So, it's a good group.
And, again, you start to get into the quality of individual that's there and what they're all about. And they're all, you want, at Iowa, especially, you want really good dudes. And, what Crawford and Pittman went with Logan Lee down to Ecuador. I think Graves might've went too, or he was thinking about going and couldn't go or something, but, just they're all, exceptional people, but you can tell that their work ethic is off the charts too and stuff. So I think this is going to be, are any of them first team all Big Ten? Graves probably could be. Maybe YA Black could be if they were, healthy and playing a lot. Craig might be, but, there's nobody that I would say, yes, absolutely him, but I think that they could go 10 deep. And in the fourth quarter, when they're chasing after Tanner Mordecai from Wisconsin or, whatever Nebraska marches out there, I think they'll be able to get it done. And then you added Jackson Filer. I mean, to me, I think this is something that Iowa's never had. It's an embarrassment of riches, but there's your guy when you want to get in a pass rush situation in a Raider or something like that.
Yep.
Here's a guy off the edge. Just go get quarterback for now. And then next year, when you start losing a lot of these guys, then you go, okay, well, where does he fit in? And because Joe Evans was kind of that way too early in his career. He was, but he beat out Amani Jones and as a walk-on, he beat him out, and Jaden McDonald for kind of that rush end stand-up spot.
Graves told us Saturday that he is up to 290. Came in at 270. He's now at 290. Crazy. And it doesn't look, there's no excess there. I was asking him what he was eating. He said a lot of protein, man.
Yeah.
I've been eating a lot of protein and lifting, and it's hard, dude was in high school this time last year and he's up to 290. So the future is bright with that group. And, having Noah Shannon and Joe Evans back, I think kind of ties everything together. You have guys that are, Logan Lee too. I think you can put him in there. Those veteran guys that have been around and kind of can be leaders for this group. And you talked about going to Ecuador, and I think it's a good unit just from a chemistry standpoint, from an individual standpoint, with potential to be even better as they develop a little bit more, some of those guys, particularly on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, they may not have splashy stats individually.
I don't think they have a Van Ness or an Epiness or somebody like that, but how often do you?
Every couple of years or so.
Yeah,
I think Graves and Black are kind of those guys.
And I think Deontay Craig has a chance to be that type of, high level edge guy.
Yeah.
But just the physical, Epiness and Van Ness are just freaks.
Yeah, and that's where I put Graves.
Yeah.
But, he's still probably kind of like Epineza and Van Ness. He's kind of that, all right, he's a sophomore. He's going to rotate, but not necessarily start. Now, if somebody was to get injured or unable to play, then he might get into the starting lineup. But Craig, there's a lot I like about him. He reminds me in style, not yet production, but style of Adrian Claiborne. And that's, I think he's got that kind of potential. He could be potentially, he was 6.5 sacks on 200 and change snaps. He had a couple, and a block punt. He's got a chance to really take off this year. And Joe Evans, we always overlook him. He's just, and the thing is, people always wonder, is he big enough? Is he big enough? Well, at Wisconsin, they play a 3-4, and he's a perfect outside linebacker build. He's a TJ Watt type and that. But so
he's really proven himself at this point. He's done it for years now. So I don't really have any questions about him. Others do, because maybe he's not the prototypical looking guy, but he gets the job done.
Yeah. 7 sacks last year? Led the team.
What did Craig have? 5.5, 5.5?
6.5, I think.
6 or 6. Yeah. I sold them short. So, that's, and when you consider how many reps he had, that's.
Well, yeah, he had 100 reps less or snaps less than everybody. Van Ness led the way. Barely led the way. It was like by a couple snaps on average, but yeah, 3 guys had 6.5. Craig, Van Ness, and Evans.
Okay.
So, and Craig had 100 snaps less than those guys did. He had a block punt, and he was, by the end of the year, he was kind of like, it reminded me a lot. And again, I'm going to use this, and God, I hate it but I feel that I have to say it. It reminds me a lot of Adrian Claiborne at the end of 2008, when he just was ascending him, and Ballard and Benz. They were just kind of still puppies, but they were
Mike Daniels.
Mike Daniels a little bit. It was Mitch King and Matt Kroll were there, and they were on the outside, and they were young, kind of like these guys. And but even then, as good as all they weren't a Van Ness. He's rare.
Flip to the other side, Scott, which people care about is offense. Nobody really cares about defense around here. They take it for granted, I think, sometimes, but offensive line has been decimated, might be a little bit extreme or too strong based on the the guys that are out are going to be back in June. So there's no need for panic. But the starting line that I wrote down, and I could have been off on this, was DeYoung at left tackle.
Yeah.
Ellsbury at left guard, Logan Jones at center, Bo Stevens right guard, and Jennings Dunker at right tackle. Is that what you had?
That's what I had. Yeah. I think when I tweeted it out, I was looking at their backs instead of then they came forward, and then I tweeted out like
I was trying to zoom my camera and video camera in on both lines so I could get the numbers, and I was still getting blocked out.
Yeah. There's a really strong chance that only one of those 5 are going to start this year, and I would probably bet, if my bet was that 3 of them would start or 1, I'd bet on the 1, because without Mason Richmond, without Connor Colby, without Rusty Feth was there, but he was there on street clothes because he can't be there yet in uniform. Without Dejon Parker.
Parker was out of the boot, which was good to see.
Right. Mike Myslinski is still out. I didn't see Griffin Little, on the. So,
I don't think I did either. Now that you mention it,
I don't know if he's there or not. I don't know, but it's hard to tell anymore.
Yeah.
But when you start to look at that, you're going, wow, that's why I didn't want to judge any part of this scrimmage, because it was just, how are you going to judge it? What? I mean, I guess I could.
Well, we just talked about how good the defensive line is. And I know guys were missing from the defensive line, which would have made it even uglier had they been playing. But I mean, the guys that were there, I mean, just from a talent and experience standpoint right now, that was a tough matchup for those guys that were playing offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. So I look at like Logan Jones, what I want to see. No fumbled snaps.
They were clean. Yeah. Whoever the second guy was, I'm not going to say who it was, had some struggles there towards the end of practice. There were, I think, 2 fumbled snaps in the last probably handful of plays of the practice. But at least they ended on a high note on a touchdown pass to Hayden Large.
Yeah, exactly. I figured that as soon as I saw that play, I'm like, okay, practice is over.
That's the George Costanza going out on a high note. I'm going out on a high note. Hayden Large.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because for most of the practice, it was kind of like when the car got broken when he kept leaving at a Yankee Stadium, and then, they took it out and got in that car wreck. But no, I mean, I came across from the guys who competed, Bo Stevens, Jennings Dunker, DeYoung to some extent, but especially the 2 younger ones. I came across thinking, all right, they're ascending, they're getting better. It's hard to judge it, it's hard to grade it, but you can see a little bit of it, and just, but it's one practice out of 15, and it's hard to gauge it anyway. But in this case, it's really difficult. And I thought, because how I feel like it's going to line up is you're going to see Richmond, Colby,
Jones,
and Jones for sure. And the other 2 are a little more up, but Rusty Feth is going to have a really good shot.
You think it'd be Feth and Parker, right? I mean, ideally,
that's what you want. And then you'd have maybe DeYoung be your swing tackle.
I think he's a valuable piece that can play both tackle spots. Right. Maybe not at a starter's level, like initially, but a guy you can put in there and be okay with.
Right. And then, with like Rusty Feth, this would be perfect for him, is if you could have Bo Stevens and maybe Dunker too, for that matter, rotate in, every 3rd series. And, maybe they do the same thing with Colby. It's just, at least early on in the season, because you're going to get somebody dinged up who's not going to be able to play. And because I do think that there's some really talent. There's some talent there. It's just still pretty young, inexperienced. Yeah,
just doesn't have the experience really.
I talk about drinking from a fire hose. That was Bo Stevens last year. He had 10 or 11 starts as a redshirt freshman. He was not ready for that.
Yeah.
But you just can't line up with 10 guys either. You can't say, this guy's not ready, so we're going to leave left, right guard blank. So I think if in a perfect world, if you could have, say, Rusty Feth and Bo Stevens rotate, have 6 guys, and then DeYoung is your, kind of swing tackle. And then whether it's Ellsbury or Dunker, maybe Mislinski even gets healthy. Then you're going, okay, you feel like you got, 8 or 9 guys that you could go out there with and not feel like you're, really losing or anything. And I think that would be great for this unit. I mean, it's not there yet.
And I think that's the shittiest part of this, if I could use that word, is that we understand and we know how much continuity and chemistry means for Iowa's offensive linemen. It's not one guy, it's a group of 5 moving together and they haven't been able to do that. So it's going to be kind of a crash course when they get to August.
Yeah. I mean, if you're to tell me what was the worst, there were 2 injuries that I think this spring that were just like killers for this team. And Parker was one of them.
Yes.
Parker and Anderson to me are the 2 that it's like, oh my God. Because at least with, Richmond being out or Colby being out, they've played a lot. Yes, they could always get better.
They've played a lot and they've played alongside each other. So they have an understanding of what, the strengths are of each guy, and they move in unison together. Whereas it would have been nice to see Parker out there to get a chance to kind of, get used to what Bo Stevens is like next to him.
And get a chance to see what he's like blocking every single or every other day for 5 weeks against, a high level defense, against some really good players, because he's coming up from Division II. And he's got a great body for this, but who knows? You just don't know. So it is a clear jump up when you're talking about, I don't care how good. I've seen the high level Division II. I've covered Division II championship game before. It is nothing like the Big Ten, and it's nothing at all like what you're facing at Iowa, because that defensive line again is one of the best in the country. So that's just that was a real shame. I think Rusty Feth, you can, he's experienced, and even though he's been at Miami of Ohio, he's played against some, Big Ten teams. He's played in bowl games, and so you feel like, he could probably handle getting in, kind of like Jack Heflin did a few years ago. But that one, and then wide receiver, man.
Let's take a break before we get into that. I need a chance here to gather my thoughts about receiver.
In the old days, I would have liked back in the 90s when I smoked. It's like, all right, let's start it up.
Good, perfect time for us to take a break here and leave everybody hanging on our wide receiver thoughts here. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Systems Unlimited, doing great work now for over 50 years. Thank you very much for their support of the podcast and what they do in the community. We're going to hear from a couple more of our sponsors here, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk about receivers and more. Reloaded my coffee. Going to need some more coffee for this segment. The good thing is, Scott, it's April, and there's plenty of time for this to work itself out. Obviously, with Seth Anderson and Nico Reganey being out on Saturday, those are 2 of 3 guys that you're at least you have some. You're going to be depending on Deontay Vines, Nico Reganey, Seth Anderson. Those are right now probably going into August your top 3 receivers. We'll see what happens with Jacob Bostic coming back from injury, what the true freshman can do, and then what happens here in the portal. I thought, tying this into the receiver conversation, Scott, I thought, and maybe this is just because it's who he is. Kirk talking about the transfer portal, and I get that they want to fit and chemistry is important and you don't want somebody to be disruptive, but I know you don't want to be disrespectful to a really hardworking group of walk-ons that bust their ass every day. But Iowa needs another receiver or two in the transfer portal.
Yeah, at least he talked about it, and he said that was probably a position that they were going to target this week.
Yep.
I know that they
probably.
Yeah, they ought to. I mean, God, this is when you go out to the portal, and granted, everybody wanted 2 or 3 receivers in the portal this year. They probably should have grabbed at least 2, and here they go and get 1, and then he's out with a hamstring the whole entire spring. It's like, God, what now? And then Nico's been around for he's Methuselah in this offense, so you're all right there. But then you go, they've got 1 scholarship guy out there because with Brecht sticking with baseball and Bostic still hurt, and then you're like, you got to do better than this. This is the asthma to a healthy program. Right now. And I went through, Rob, the last 10 years of their classes, and this is the grossest stat that you'll ever find in any of these sports. This is worse than the offense as a whole. When you start going through, they've had 24 scholarships receivers they've signed in the last 10 years. 12 have transferred with eligibility, 3 changed positions, 2 changed sports, and 1 medically retired. Only 3 have exhausted their eligibility at Iowa. This is freshman receivers, and 3 more have that chance. That's not good. That's brutal.
That is not a good success rate, as they say.
I mean, your 3 are Matt Vandenberg, Amir Smith-Marset, and Brandon Smith. That's it. I mean, because you've got, there have been guys like Deontay Young who flipped over the other side, Henry Marquez, who flipped over the other side. And you've got, Jay Shield, who medically retired. And, but then you've just got a slug of guys that just didn't work out. And really, of the bunch, to me, the most painful were the big threesome from the COVID era. I mean, Keegan Johnson, he's a receiver. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. Keegan's fault, Iowa's fault, doesn't matter. He's a Kansas State. Arlen Bruce, maybe he didn't quite fit here. He'd fit other places. High character guy. I really liked him. He's at Oklahoma State. And Brody, you knew that this day was coming. You were just hoping it would be 1 more year away, not this year. But you got to do something, And now the upside, if there is, not upside, the possibility where you can just put a salve on that blister is that you really only need 4 to get you through, especially with those 2 tight ends, because they are elite level tight ends. And if you can have, if you got Ragaini and you've got, Vines, you hope takes a step forward, I think he'll be a competent receiver. If, say, Seth Anderson can become a really good receiver, and then you go in the portal and find somebody, and then maybe Alec Wick while you're at it. Okay, they're not going to end up on any all-conference lists, but you feel like, all right, you can get through that with those 2 tight ends and an improved quarterback for sure, and a running game. All right, you can survive that. That's not bad. But what we saw Saturday does not count for that. It was not that in that area at all, and I don't know that it ever will be. If you march that out this fall, this is a team that might get to Indianapolis and might get smoked again.
I think you've got to be. I think you've got to be ultra aggressive here in the transfer portal. Why invest like Iowa did in December, January, and February in the transfer portal, addressing needs? Coming out of spring, you knew you would probably have a better idea of needs. You went in thinking, okay, we'll have Seth Anderson, Nico will practice. We'll get a good look at, our top 3. Didn't happen. That should, to me, be even more of a red flag that injuries happen at this position, which grab a couple guys out of the portal. You're not going to find a you're probably not going to find a superstar in there, but you need to have guys that can help you.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I think Alec Wick can help. I don't know about the true freshman. I don't know if Alex Moda is somebody that can play as a true freshman or one of the other guys that are coming in. But you got I don't think you need to be in a panic mode, but I think you got to be pretty aggressive here in the transfer portal at receiver.
Yeah, no question. I think you've got to have at least one more.
Yeah.
Because you look at this team top to bottom, Rob, and if you pull the pin on wide receiver and just see everything else, it is easily the best team in the West. But you plug wide receiver in there and you're thinking, okay, you're going to have to win every game kind of like you did last year. Don't make any mistakes. Well, that's the way they play. All right, fine. Run the ball effectively. Well, they didn't do that last year but they survived. Play great defense. Well, we know that's going to happen. But you're going to have to stretch the field once in a while. And maybe you look at this roster top to bottom and outside of wide receiver and offensive line today, but I do think that will get better, that you go into Indianapolis, you'll get crushed. But if you have competent wide receivers, then you can pull them down to your level, like Iowa's done in the past. Then if it's Michigan or Ohio State, hey, let's play 4 quarters of fuck you football. Sorry, but and play punts and punch you in the face for 4 quarters. And then you might be able to pull it out with a field goal. But until then, you can't go 3 and out 8 times in a row and expect to win. I mean, it's just so.
And opponents are going to stack until you show you can stretch the field.
And the sad part is, Rob, I saw it on Saturday. The top 2 quarterbacks are better than the top 2 quarterbacks last year. They are. Cade looked, it was 7-on-7, so you kind of go, I'll give him that. He's better. Deacon Hill was much better, than what we saw last year, especially at Alex Padilla. And, he could probably, do a couple of things differently, I suppose. But overall, I feel like quarterback is a major upgrade. I think offensive line will be an improvement. How much of an improvement? I'm not going to predict they're going to be like the 2002 team or anything, but I'm going to say that they're going to be better. I think tight end is elite. I think the running game's pretty good. I think the running backs are good. It's just, it's like, kind of like going in for your physical. It's like, yeah, you're in great shape. Oh my God, your cholesterol level is off the charts. Get some Lipitor, man. Go to the transfer portal, get some Lipitor.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to benefit from better quarterback play or better offensive line play, a better running game as much if you don't have that on the outside.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we invested in Parker and Feth and 2 quarterbacks, we're investing in our offense, but then, you do get Seth Anderson, credit for that. But we saw last year, Charlie Jones left late. That was tough to deal with. But even before that, they should have added somebody before, even with Charlie Jones, and they didn't. And then it bit him in the ass in the fall. They can't do that again now. They have to address this.
They've got a week to address it. So it happens this year, and they can. And then they are on players. They're going after players.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, but they've got to seal the deal at least on one, if nothing else. Because the last thing you want is for this team. Last year was the worst year you'll ever see. But I think back to like 2016, Rob, where they had the line won the Joe Moore Award. It looked pretty good by the end of the year. You had an NFL quarterback in CJ Beathard, who was probably comparable to Cade McNamara, I would say. You had 2 running backs who ran for 1,000 yards. You had tight end who was hurt, but pretty good. And then nothing at wide receiver, especially after Matt Vandenberg got hurt. And you just scratched and clawed and cut your way to win 8 games. And it's like, you really need to do that again. You've seen this before. We've lived it before. And that's what I think is the most frustrating part about this is you got to do something about it. And, Yeah.
And if you're having trouble developing and retaining
Mhm.
guys you bring in out of high school, you have another option now.
Right. This isn't, they used to say there's no free agency. Well, there is now.
Yeah.
This is free agency right this very second. And, last year was a problem for a couple of reasons. One, because of all of the receivers they had, they only recruited one guy, and Jacob Bostic.
Right.
Because, you're thinking at that time, right before signing day, you still had Tyrone Tracy and you had Charlie Jones and you had the threesome that we talked about earlier. They're all gone now. And then other guys that were really on the cusp of playing, guys like Desmond Hudson, and they transferred, Kayvon Matthews, same thing. And now there's just nothing. And they'd be really in trouble if Nico decided not to come back.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I do look at this unit, and it causes you a lot of anxiety on a football perspective. But if you just take a deep breath, think, okay, Nico, pretty good player. Deontay Vines, can he take a step forward? He looked good at times last year, but can he be good? If Seth Anderson could play well, if they bring in another guy who's part of that rotation, and if somebody else, walk on, incoming freshman, can fill that and be number 5, and they stay relatively healthy, it's probably a C level receiving core. Not quite what it was with Brandon Smith or Mir Smith-Massett, but not bad either. Yeah, this team could get to Indianapolis and throw down. But if it can't, if there's injuries, if it's like it was on Saturday or any point last year, God damn it, you're wasting another year. And I think, and at this point, you just kind of have yourself to blame.
Yep. We'll see what happens this week. Keep your eye on it, folks, and we'll see what type of movement. I'm sure there'll be plenty of news out there just in terms of guys' names and things like that. From a quarterback standpoint, Scott, I was a little surprised that Kirk revealed that Hill was ahead of Labus. I'm not sure. I mean, I appreciate the honesty. I guess at this point, I would have probably let that play out through August, but maybe they wanted, some stability there. Maybe that's the reasoning behind it. It was surprising to me that they saw enough from Hill, and maybe that's a good thing this, in April, to say that he is ahead of Labus right now.
Yeah, I think it would have been, as we hadn't seen Deacon Hill, but he took the majority of the real snaps. I mean, Labus played a lot too, but he was with the first unit. He was out there a lot of the time.
Yep.
They would have been lying, and it would have looked bad if they wouldn't have admitted that he wasn't, and granted, it's still got a long way to go, but I think I saw it that way. Clearly, I thought Hill was much better than Labus. And I think Labus is much better than he was last year at this time. So, a year ago, as everyone was, you're kind of grasping at straws going, okay, maybe this guy, look under this rock here, okay, well, maybe he's the one, he's the savior. But no, I did see it that way. That's probably a good thing, because in some ways what it does is it tells Joey Labus, here's where you stand. Be honest, be upfront. Here's where you stand. You're third. And with Marco coming in, who knows where Marco ends up? He could be third by the end of fall or something like that. So if Joey was debating his future, that gives him an option, or maybe it tells him, okay, you've got to get better. And maybe he fights. Maybe that's what he wants to do, is say, hey, I'm going to battle here. It's up to him what he wants to do. I mean, I think we all can kind of look at the depth chart and some spots and go, are you going to be here or not? Do you want to play, or are you going to hit the portal? I think there's a handful of guys that you can realistically say should probably weigh their options, but again, it's their lives. And we've seen it with other players, Dallas Craddock being at the very top of the list last year, that you could stay, get your degree, be a part of this team, then move on potentially, or you could just say, you know what, I've got a finite amount of time left to play college football, like Reggie Bracy, and nobody would fault you if that's the path you want to go.
I'm flipping through Twitter now. I know as soon as we stop recording this, there's gonna be somebody in the portal from Iowa, and there's gonna be news of somebody from the portal visiting Iowa. Those are my predictions. I don't see anything on there yet at 10:08 a.m. on Monday, April 24th, but we'll see. I would expect some activity here throughout the week.
The 12:04.
Yeah. We'll have to see. Like we talked about with what Scott just talked about, Joey Labus knows where he stands now. I think some of those guys in the secondary, maybe some offensive linemen who are kind of caught up in, the depth chart and not being able to move up the ladder. It's one of those points in the season or during the year where you evaluate where you stand. Yeah. And that's going on and has been going on, at Iowa and elsewhere. So you'll have guys from Iowa going in and you'll have guys from other places going in. And for Iowa, they're hoping there are a lot of receivers going in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there have been some already.
Yeah.
And it's going to be aim, ready, shoot on a lot of these guys because it's a very quick turnaround. I think the NCAA was too early with this transfer portal starting the 15th. I think it should have been 20th, 25th.
It originally was the 1st through 15th of May. I think they may have moved that because that's the open period for high school.
It could be, but they did it in January, but nobody really knew about it or thought about it. And then it's like, well, damn. And
even if you did like the last week of April and the first week of May would be okay. Cause then pretty much everybody is done with spring practice now. So you give everybody that 2-week window after spring.
And the other part is, and this is something we could talk about more on Thursday, but like this week's the draft.
Yeah.
And you not just Kirk, but every coach of every college program has players who are prospects, who are draft picks, and they're going to want to go, whether it's to the draft or the draft parties. They're going to want to be there for their players. And then this is also a week to meet with players. And, maybe it's a situation where players could go to the portal from the 15th through the 30th, but they can't be recruited till the 1st or something.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I mean, anything and everything can change with the portal. We all know that, but still this week is going to be, they're going to hit that hard, and they're going to have to try to find somebody, probably 2 players. And because I would expect there to be a player or 2 that decides that it's time to turn the page, and rightly so. I mean, again, you get to this point in your career. I always felt like if you are entering your junior year and after the spring, you are not in the depth chart, it's probably time to really evaluate where you are. Have that personal come to Jesus meeting of it's time to either decide you're going to be a good teammate and keep working, and whatever happens, or it's probably time to move on if you want to really play. And so I think anybody who's right now kind of on the sophomore line and you're not on the depth chart or approaching the depth chart or rotating or whatever, then it's probably time to, because the guys behind you, you look at a couple of the defensive backs, that one of the true freshmen are probably going to move into some sort of rotation, and you've got 2 true freshmen or redshirt freshmen and 1 true sophomore who are now on the depth chart. So if you're on that sophomore junior line, it might be time to start thinking about, you want your degree from the University of Iowa, that's awesome, but you're not probably going to be seeing the field very much.
We'll see how that stuff shakes out. We can wrap up this with group tight end and running back together, because I think offensively those are clearly the 2 deepest positions. Really impressed with the group at running back all the way through Terrell Washington Jr. He ran the wrong way a few times and got a little caught up with not being on the right side of the quarterback and those things. But the guy just got here in January. He looks like he runs hard. He's got some wiggle to his game. If he was going to Purdue, he has the ability to catch the ball. So Iowa 4 deep, at least at that position now. And then tight end, I mean, Ostrenga would probably start on a lot of teams at tight end, and he's the third guy now. And then after that, you've got guys like Stylianos, who looked better Saturday than I had seen him the first few times. So just a ton of depth there. I mean, Eric All looks the part. Lachey, those guys, probably the best tight end duo in the league. Probably will, by the end of the season, rank among the best duos in the country, if not already. And then just stacked at running back, stacked at both of those positions, which is good because both of those positions are physical positions where you often have to deal with injury.
Right. I mean, I had last year that Iowa used 2 tight ends or more on 61 to 7.7% of their snaps. I would expect that number to go up. And the only other time that they were in that territory above 50% was in 2018 with Hawkinson and Fant. Now last
Good
year,
reason.
yeah, right. It should have been higher than that year.
Yes,
but
specialist.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. I used that in my story today. But Eric All is not a specialist. He's a tight end.
No.
And when you do have that kind of, what we just talked about at wide receiver, it makes sense to have 70% of your snaps include 2 tight ends. And I think Eric All and Luke Lachey are among the best duos in the country already because I think they both are NFL players. Are they first rounders? It's hard to say. I don't know if I'll go there, but I think Luke Lachey might be. I think All might be a top 3 round guy. That's pretty damn good. And as you said, I think Addison Ostrenga looks the part is, okay, next year he might be that next guy that comes in. And Stylianos, did some blocking. I thought he looked better the other day than normal. And Johnny Jacuzzi and was out there. Really a bright spot for me, Rob, was fullback.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, they're going to have to get rid of fullback because they don't have anybody.
Yeah, after Eli Miller's injury, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, they lost Potabom and Palisard and now Eli Miller. But Hayden Large, a great name for an Iowa fullback, right?
Yes.
Looked great. I mean, he's big. Obviously, he's bigger than any fullbacks they've had because he's a tight end. Catching
for those
passes.
that don't know, he came from Dordt. He walked on from Dordt College. It's a really interesting story.
Yeah, and hey, he looks the part, and I hope if they do anything after this is instead of using a walk-on linebacker who's not going to play linebacker for that position in the future. And I mean, I understand why they do that, but maybe it's better to do that with a walk-on tight end because they're usually better athletes and they are bigger and they catch passes. And so
yeah,
I like what they did. I like that he caught some good passes. I like that he was able to he's big and physical and if he can he can be a plus at that position. So then, but as you said, running back, shit. As long as they stay somewhat healthy there, and you hope that, that's always a question mark for Iowa. I like Caleb Johnson a lot. I think he'd be one of the top 6 or so running backs in the Big Ten this year. I like Jazz Patterson and LaShawn Williams. I think they got a really good trio there. Washington's young. See what happens. I don't know much about Kamari Moulton yet. He hasn't come to campus, but
he's more like Patterson. He's more of a Patterson is getting bigger, and I talked to him about that on Saturday. But Moulton's going to need some. He's going to need some weight room time, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. And red shirt, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like. I mean, when I look at the offense, I think, hey, tight end among the best in the country, running back, really healthy situation for where they're at. Quarterback, good spot. I like where they are at quarterback. Yes, Cade McNamara can't be an 11 on 11, but he's still okay. He's better than what they've had for a few years. Offensive line, a lot of concerns, but I think they're moving in the right direction. I'm not going to say they're going to be any Pro Bowlers there, but I think they're going to be okay at times. wide receiver is just, again, they've got to do something there. They've got to go out and get a guy, and then they got to hope for good health, and then they got to also hope for growth, because I mean, no offense to Deontay Vines, but he hasn't played a whole lot.
No, he's not a given.
Yeah. I mean, is he just a guy, or is he going to be a good player? We don't know that. Now, he might be able to go out and tear it up, get 40 receptions, which would be really good for a position like that. But I just haven't seen it yet. He could show it off, and that'll be good. But Seth Anderson, he did it at a different level. Let's see what he does in the Big Ten. Jacob Bostic, get healthy, bud. You need to get healthy. And then the three guys coming in, I don't know about you, Rob, but I never count on them. They just, if one of them comes in and he can play, great. If they can't, well, that's why they're true freshmen.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened a lot during the Kirk Ferentz era where a guy comes in at receiver and is more than a fringe contributor.
Yeah.
We've seen it. Obviously, Dominique Douglas was not a good one. That did not work out, but it worked out that season.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned Clinton Solomon on a previous podcast as well. It happens, but it's just not that likely. So you can't depend on it. Got to get in the portal. So we'll bookend this segment. We started with the wide receivers. We'll finish with a wide receiver thought. We'll take a break now. Last break of the show. Come back and we'll talk a little bit about what Brian Ferentz had to say on Thursday. Hang in there. And we are back. Thank you to our sponsors. Did want to slip in here to let folks know. Ariza, Asian cuisine. Just mention our podcast or any podcast, just the Hawk Fanatic podcast. You can say the hotspot if you want to give us a little extra credit. Go into the restaurant, say you heard about their restaurant from our podcast, and they will take 10% off of your meal. So great deal. Check that out. It's around corner of Highway 6, Highway 1 in Iowa City. Ariza Asian Cuisine. Check them out. Get 10% off if you mention our podcast. Scott, I was not at the coordinators on Thursday, had some other things going on, but did rewatch or watch video of all of them. Nothing huge came out of Phil Parker and LeVar Woods. Kind of know what you're going to get from those guys, and nice to hear them kind of update things that are going on under their watch. But all eyes focused on the offense. That's been the topic since last season, before last season. Can it get better? I guess before we talk about specifics of what Brian said, being there, I want to get your opinion on this. What was the vibe that you got from Brian?
Very businesslike. A lot of times, especially with me, probably Chad, a few other people, it's kind of some give and take, some banter, if you will, jokes here from time to time. I think he knew what was going to be heading into his direction. It wasn't going to be fun. There wasn't going to be, it hasn't been fun for Brian. And when the overwhelming majority of Iowa fans don't want him to be there, I think he felt like, and it was proven throughout, that there's really just no way for him to win. Whatever he says is going to be picked at and put in the worst possible context for him. So I think he felt, I'm just going to be straightforward. I'm not going to get into too much banter. I'm not going to get into too many details. I'm just going to say it, and that's it. And, I thought that was fair for him vibe wise. He wasn't condescending. I didn't think he was arrogant by any stretch. I just think that overall he was just more of here's what it is, and that's it.
It seems unhealthy to me right now. I don't, like you said, I don't know what he can do to win back in the court of public opinion. I'm not sure. I mean, Iowa would have to be just lights out offensively. And we know that's not the construction or makeup of this team. They're not going to go out 5 wide. They're not going run and shoot. They're going to be a ball control offense and a complementary football team. And the offense, we just talked earlier in the podcast about how this defense is expected to be. You've got your, all Big Ten kicker and punter back. You've got a kick-ass punt returner coming back in Cooper DeJean. You've got good coverage teams. I mean, the strength of your team is defense and special teams. You just need a competent offense. And a competent offense, I think, while if Iowa wins every game, then it's fine. But a competent offense is still going to be picked apart by the fan base because it's not going to score enough for their liking.
People want exciting football, and Iowa's offense is not exciting. That's just really the way it breaks down. There's not a lot of big plays. There's not a lot of high scoring plays. There are some, but it's not enough to where people love it. Like Iowa women's basketball, up and down the court, and you got somebody shoots from the logo and scores 30 points a game, and the offense, even men's basketball, scores at a really high clip. Iowa football is the exact opposite. It's defense, it's special teams, control the ball, play complementary football, and to the point where you just squeeze the life out of an opponent and you win the game. And the problem is the 25 number will get thrown around considerably. It's the drive for 325. They have not handled a lot of things well, PR wise. I think Gary Barta is to blame too.
These benchmarks are ridiculous, Scott. I think I don't know what the thought process was behind this. It added fuel to the fire, and now it's going to be something people are watching throughout this year. I looked it up. I'm sure you have. The 25 point per game benchmark would have been 85th last year.
Yeah. Tied
with Arkansas State.
Right.
70 FBS teams won 7 games last year.
Yeah.
So what does that benchmark do? So I don't understand why they did this.
Mm-hmm. It's embarrassing to everybody. It's embarrassing to the program. It's embarrassing to the athletic director. It's embarrassing to the offensive coordinator. I mean, everybody's at fault too. Everybody. It's not a Brian Ferentz thing so much as it is a Kirk Ferentz thing. Is it, do you really want to subject your son to all of this ridicule? But, and then the athletic director, you're in charge of everything. And it just looks like
what's he trying to do? Is he trying to show that he has some control here or has some say? Because those benchmarks are ridiculous.
Right. Honestly, I just say 9 games is a win, even then, it makes it really tough. And it makes it tough on Gary because he's the one fielding as much, because people start hitting up me on Twitter. I'm like, here's Gary Barta's email, go bitch to him. I have nothing to do with this. What do you want me to do about it? I mean,
we're watching the same thing you are.
You think I like watching this? You think I like writing stories about this all the time? I'd like to write about something a little more exciting than, and I mean, granted, I do look back a little bit differently now at 9-6 in Illinois, simply because both defenses were fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll see that this weekend.
Yeah.
But that said, there were opportunities there that Iowa completely squandered and should have won. But anyway, with Brian, he knows everybody hates him. And, also knows that if his dad's not the head coach, he's probably not there.
Tough way to live, man.
Yeah. But then again, I just to try to make it somewhat fair for this, I do interject that, hey, this team not that long ago scored almost 32 points a game. That was second in the Big Ten. That it won, on that 12-game win streak, which was not that long ago. They averaged almost 34 points a game and plus 20 in margin of victory. So this team is capable of that. And what was the damn difference in 2020 versus 2022, 2023?
Even 2019.
Yes.
There were signs there. I mean, you had playmakers. We talked about Amir, Brandon Smith, Tyrone Tracy was really good that year. I mean, that offense against USC was something to behold. That was fun.
Yeah. I mean, 49 points. You look at all the receivers on the field, and they were able to go up and down the field. And in 2018, they averaged more than 31 points a game. So they've done it before. What's the difference? It's offensive line, and
receiver.
And receiver.
Now, the last couple of years.
Right. I mean, in 2020, when they had Spencer was in his first year and he really struggled, at least they had something to lean on, and that was the running game. They averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Tyler Goodson was really good, but having ass kickers like Alaric Jackson and Tyler Linderbaum up front, and then guys like Cole Banwert, and that's what this team has really missed. It's not even the upper level NFL guys. It's the Kyler Schatz, it's the Cole Banwerts, it's the guys when they get to their fourth, fifth year, Ross Reynolds, and all of a sudden, bam, they're pretty freaking good. That's what it missed last year. That's what it needed. It needed, whether it was a walk-on or a 2-star or low-level 3-star, just to come in and really solidify a position and play his best football in it as a senior. They didn't have that. So if the offensive line can get to that point, and they can run the football along with that, because I think they have the running backs to do that, this team will look a lot different. This team will score 28 points a game at a minimum. And then, the chuckles will immediately subside by early November when they've already hit 325 points. But, and plus they don't play Michigan or Ohio State until at least December.
Yes. We'll see. I mean, I just think, and not to belabor the point, I think they set themselves up for the fall with these benchmarks and just added fuel to a fire that was already blazing. But I don't know. We can't go back on that now. It is what it is in terms of what they're doing for that. I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not anything from LeVar or Phil that stood out to you from that?
Not entirely. I guess, again, one more thing going back to Brian, when he brought up, I would be at peace with whatever happens, if he's not.
A few things he said, I think, rubbed people the wrong way. And I think we've gotten to that almost standoff point where Brian's like, I am not going to let these people being the critics know that they're getting to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say I have no comment for the fans that are criticizing me. And I'm not going to say that I'm worried about my job. He's not going to show weakness.
Yeah. And I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Because we deal with it all the time. I know you have even more than I have. So you know what? F him. All he's worried about is what he can do in the building. And like it or not, he brought in a hell of a quarterback. He did. He helped bring in other guys too. So I think this is just when he says he'd be at peace, if that's what happens. And I brought up a hypothetical, which I think is a few people slammed and a lot of people agreed with, which is, hey, when you look at 2 games in particular last year that you won with 24 points, at Purdue was 24-3 in a really windy day. And I didn't bring this part up, but it is part of the discussion. Do you air it out? Try to get that 25th point. Or late against Wisconsin, it's 24-10. You guys recover a fumble with 2 minutes left and you're at like Wisconsin 20. Try to score some more points. He's like, if we're up 24-10 on Wisconsin, I'm happy, and that's the way it should be. It's about winning football games. It's not about padding your stats. And Iowa's never been like that. And if they go to the Big Ten title game and they're 1 point short of averaging 25 points a game, and if they win, let's say they win in Indianapolis, like they did against Michigan, beat Michigan, 6-7 years ago, 14-13, and it costs them the chance to do that. They will dare the athletic director to fire their offensive coordinator.
And that's the thing too, right? I mean, we talk about the complementary football and just doing what you need to do on a given day in a given game situation, even to win,
Yeah.
whatever that is, offense, defense, special teams. When you put a number on it like that 25, like you said, even if they win the West and go to the Big Ten championship game and win, 9 games, you're still going to have people bitching that they didn't get to that 25-point line. And chances are, if they make it there, they're going to be above the 25 because, it makes sense that way. But you're just adding, I'm sorry, I'm belaboring the point on these stupid benchmarks, but it's something that irritates me a lot for some reason.
Well, it's something that everybody has to talk about. It's something like at my place. I mean, it's a joke. I go on podcasts on our place at the Athletic, and it's like the drive for, we've got a graphic for it and stuff. So you've turned yourself into a little bit more of a punchline. Even if they play really well, if they go and beat Penn State on the road, and it's a slugfest like it usually is. And, even when they won, a couple of years ago was 24-20, 23-20, something like that. I mean,
yeah,
they get to 25 points, but they won that fucking game, a top 5 matchup. So I just,
and you talked about the Purdue game.
Yeah,
that was a good offensive performance, but it wasn't 25 points because you didn't need to score in the second half.
Well, exactly. And that's the nuance of it that makes
right.
it 25. And I'm not, they should get 25 points.
Right. Yeah. Especially with 2 shitty teams in the non-conference.
Right. But yeah, 24-3 at Purdue in that wind crazy place that day. If you would have decided, we gotta keep scoring, a pass might have fluttered. It might have hung up there. You might have risked your quarterback getting hurt.
Yep.
And then they pick it off, and then boom, maybe the momentum changes. I remember one year when they fired Darrell Hazel the next day. It was like 2016, and Iowa was up just huge. And then in the fourth quarter, Purdue could not be stopped. And Iowa still won big time by like 2 or 3 touchdowns, but it was just this constant barrage. And with that team like that's capable, with a quarterback and a receiver that's capable, the last thing you want is to give them any life. I mean, it's kind of like when you look at Iowa's style of offense, it's like a wrestling match when you're a mat wrestler. And if you're going against Spencer Lee, and you're holding on, you don't let him up. You just keep him down as long as you can and squeeze every opportunity out of it, because you don't want to get in a situation where, you're up 10-4, but you just got put your back, and your momentum swings and then you get upset, in the last second or two of the match. And that's kind of the same way here. So I don't know. I do think they're stupid. I think they'll get past it. What that means for Brian Ferentz moving forward, I don't know, but I do think it's an unfortunate situation.
He seems unhappy, for lack of a better term. I think he would probably be happier somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's just my view from outside. I haven't asked him about it. And it feels like the fans aren't going to be on his side. The majority of fans won't be on his side no matter what happens. Because again, this offense isn't going to go out and score 40 points a game. It's just not. It's not going to be, this team isn't going to be led by its offense.
No.
It's not built that way.
No. And let's take the opener. I think it's Utah State. And Utah State, was like in the hundreds in most defensive categories.
Yeah, bad.
And if Iowa goes and it's 38-0 in the third quarter, do you think they're going to put 70 on them? They never have done that.
No.
Then it's like, okay, let's get the second team out there, get some reps, run the football. It's hot out here. We're just going to keep going this way. And then finally just grind it out and win 48-10 or something like that. And all right. But now, in the back of everybody's mind, it's like, yeah, hey, you got to the 20-yard line with 4 minutes to go. Are you going to put the ball up? Or are you just going to kind of, or even on 4th and 6 at the 14 and you're winning by 5 touchdowns, do you kick a field goal? I mean, that's an asshole thing to do, but you've got yourself put in that situation, so I don't know. We'll see. I think that they, the one thing about this team and the offense is I think the offense would be better. Defense will be very, very good. Special teams are elite. They've got an advantageous schedule. So I think that they probably got an opportunity to pass that and the average of it pretty early. Still, it's going to be something that's going to be discussed all year long. And that's an embarrassment for this program.
Yes, and that's the situation we're in, and we're in April, and we're in the last week of the transfer portal opening. So we're expecting. I haven't looked on Twitter to see if anything's come down, but we'll certainly have some activity this week. And Scott and I will be back on Thursday. What we'll do that day on our normal day is preview the NFL draft, which starts on Thursday. And then we'll catch up on any happenings in the transfer portal for any of the teams: women's basketball, men's basketball, football, wrestling, baseball, whoever's in the transfer portal doing anything. We'll recap that. But I think with this one has run its course. Hopefully we gave you guys a decent rundown of what we saw in the spring game and the situations at each position. And that'll about do it, Scott. What do you got going on today?
I wrote today my depth chart for the offense, and tomorrow it's going to be I'm writing today. It'll either appear tomorrow or Wednesday on the defense, but I've been knee deep in draft stuff. I've written about a lot of stuff way beyond Iowa. And like this week, Thursday and Friday, I'm all grades. So I do the grades when they come out, who your Jets pick at 13, and so it's kind of been funny. This has actually been like a reprieve the last couple of days to be able to do Iowa, because I did 7 stories on the draft, and I think I included 2 little Iowa tidbits the whole week. So yeah, that's my week coming up, and then things get a little bit more normal a week from now, when kind of recap the draft and who went where and what their situations are like. And so, yeah, how about you? How you doing? What you got? Baseball?
I've got, what am I doing this week? I'm doing some position analysis after post-spring position analysis, run down each spot, kind of what we talked about a little bit today. And then this weekend I'm going to Madison for a club volleyball tournament. So,
oh man.
And I'll check in on Barry, make sure everything's going all right with him when we get.
See if he's got some, cannoli for you there.
I'm gonna buy him socks and make him wear them.
Yes, that'll be awesome. Yeah, leave the gun, take the cannoli.
All right, folks. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We appreciate it. And Scott and I will be back on Thursday with some draft talk and some portal talk and all that good stuff. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.